A big warm welcome to everyone. We will now proceed towards our second last session for today. It's going to be a masterclass on how are you leveraging BPO for your HR function. This would be an insightful session focusing on BPOs within the HR function, its current status in Asia, its future direction, and its advantages and disadvantages. And to present this session, I would like to invite Morgan Yeats, founder Yeats HR Consultancy. Morgan consults organizations around the world regarding the HR business services and BPO domain. His career spans over 30 years in leadership, consulting, and research with the industry's premier global HR service consultancies and providers. I'd like to welcome Morgan. He's also been a research director for global HR business process outsourcing market. Thank you so much for taking out your time, Morgan. It's truly a pleasure to welcome you here. And over to you. Thank you. And we look forward to a great session with you.
Thank you, Ruby. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. From me, I'm Morgan Yates with Yates HR Consultancy. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. I'm very happy to talk to you today about leveraging HR BPO for your company and especially the Asia market. So let me share my screen and we will go right into this. Good. If that looks good to everyone, I will go from here. Here are the topics I want to talk about for today. There are three areas that I will look at. First, of course, the current state and the future direction of the actual services being provided in Asia. And by Asia, I'm talking about, of course, a wide area of geography and a wide variety of country sizes and sophistication. So what I say today is going to vary by country, but I'm still going to try to make specific comments where I can. So we'll talk about that, but then we're going to talk about what you should be considering when you are looking at HR BPO, even expanding it from anything you may already be outsourcing. And then lastly, we'll talk about where to start your own HR BPO journey and what that might look like. Let me tell you before I jump into this that I, of course, limited by time, can't cover everything that needs to be covered. I've put more in these slides than I could possibly cover even in this presentation. However, at the end of the presentation, I'll give you some contact information and I'm happy to send a copy of the slide to anyone who may be interested. First of all, let's look at what the BPO market is made up of. What are we talking about here? This is looking at the global BPO market. The value of this, I don't have it on the screen, is about $30 billion worldwide for HR BPO. That is made up of right at 50% for payroll outsourcing, about 35%, a little over a third for benefits and benefit type programs in outsourcing. And then much smaller are the next two, recruitment outsourcing and learning outsourcing. Now the remainder, this other area, I'm going to come back and talk to because that's where we're seeing a lot of growth, plus recruitment and learning. So payroll and benefits you're going to see are very mature, but the other areas are growing quickly. If we look at what this might be, let's see what the growth rates would be around the world. First of all, going from the left, I have two geography areas. Globally, HR BPO is growing about 5.5% compound annual growth rate through 2022. That is what I expect to see the market grow. That's the size of the pie. But in Asia, which is only about 10% of that global market, I see a compound annual growth rate of about 6.5%. Now that doesn't sound much different, but we're talking here, first of all, at a 20% higher growth rate, 6.5% versus 5.5% in Asia than the rest of the world. And of course, in some countries, including Australia, Singapore, Japan, Malaysia, and then China to some degree, those growth rates are much higher. Those compound annual growth rates could be around anywhere from 15% to 20% annual growth rates for 5 years. So that's very impressive, and it's something that many buyers and providers are looking at. To the right, I have what the breakout of these 5 major areas for HR BPO are growing at. Payroll and benefits, again, very mature and also very large. So they're growing at more of a rate of 5% for payroll and 4.5% compound annual growth rate for benefits. But recruitment and learning are definitely on the rise at more like 8 or even 10% for recruitment and a little bit less than that for learning. And then the other categories, again, we'll talk about that, but they're also starting to grow at different rates. What this means is not that, for example, benefits is shrinking as part of the pie, or is shrinking in terms of an absolute size of the market. The whole pie is getting bigger. But those relationships between payroll being 50%, benefits being 1/3 or 35%, et cetera, are changing. And 5 years from now, that pie will look very different. Let's see what they also look like from a technology standpoint. There are 2 types generally of BPO in the market. This is not just HR BPO, but all types of BPO, but especially in HR BPO. It's important to know there are 2 general types of services that are provided because of the history and the maturity of the HR BPO market. The HR BPO market actually began close to 50 years ago with payroll outsourcing in the US in the 50s and 60s. And they didn't use the term outsourcing, but that's what they were doing. And then as you continue to go from there, it became more mature, and then benefits was added, recruitment, and the others. But also technology began taking a greater and greater part of that administration as outsourcing and even internal administration moved from paper-based to computer-based to outsourcing-based. And so what we have today and how I look at the market is bifurcated between traditional BPO, that is the more labor-based and more manual-based services. Now, I don't mean by that they're literally shuffling pieces of paper. What I mean is that they are not highly automated. And so there's a lot of computer work involved, but a lot of the current BPO market is still under contract to providers around the world using the less automated and what we would call today the traditional BPO approach. Business process as a service, as we call it and as we know it today, has been around for now less than 10 years, where the service delivery is much more automated. It includes artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, machine learning, and a lot more hands-off approach to administering the multitude of transaction types in HR. So what does that mean for the market? First of all, the global BPO market is going to remain a majority, possibly 2/3% of the traditional BPO for the next 5 years. Why is that? Is that because companies don't like computers? No. It's because there are many contracts out there, many very large contracts, especially in the US and in Western Europe, that are under the service contracts for these traditional services, and they don't necessarily want to disrupt everything just to go to a computerized approach. They'll gradually move that way, but not quickly. However, in Asia, it's very important to note that the technologically enabled and the highly automated approach to BPO, that is business process as a service, or BPaaS, is taking off incredibly quickly, and it may be as much as 55% or even more of the Asia BPO market in 5 years. It's sort of like the telephone usage. I compare it to in Asia, whereas Asia did not have a huge market for landlines. They went through, because of the quick growth of technology, from many people having no phones to going directly to a smartphone. So you don't have the legacy of landlines or people being used to the old way of doing things. So Asia is going to become much more automated, more quickly. New startup companies who are buying BPO services and new BPO providers are going to be starting up only offering the highly automated BPaaS approach. What that is going to mean is that a certain uh, section of the market in terms of numbers of employees will be serviced much more quickly. Let me talk about the size of the market and the providers for that in just a minute. That other category, the HR BPO slice of the pie, that's just 2%. They're made up of many, many types of HR services that are outsourced, but rarely. I've got them listed here. It's important to note that these are not unimportant HR functions. For example, compensation administration or contract labor management or tax and legal compliance, time and attendance, even background checking and data forensics. These are not unimportant to the HR leader in a company. They're critically important. However, they are many times, in almost every case, they're not outsourced today. But as technology grows, as more and more services are provided, we're seeing that providers can offer reasonable and very attractive outsourcing services for this very narrow niche of the BPO pie. So we'll see growth in some of these areas, especially I think in the red box for background checking and data forensics, but also time and attendance and absence management. These are very transaction oriented. They follow rules, which means they can be programmed into a computer very quickly and easily and cheaply. So the growth of BPO in all of the world is going to continue, especially in these smaller areas, recruitment, learning and training, and these other areas presented today. But in Asia, all of these areas, and especially those smaller pieces of the pie, are going to grow more quickly because new services that are being developed will be offered in Asia much more quickly. There won't be a trickle-down effect from Western countries, but instead they will be directly offered in Asia. What I want to do now is talk about 6 or 7 major trends in HR BPO that are going to impact Asia. Now, they're not all Asia specific, but they will have a direct impact on Asia. So let me go through these somewhat quickly. Again, I don't expect me to cover every word here, but you can receive a copy of this presentation later. First of all, BPO providers are investing heavily in technology for new service delivery. They are investing anywhere from 1% to 5% of their revenue in R&D for technology. They're taking advantage of all of the new things that you read about and hear about, but especially artificial intelligence for making machine-based decisions that will eliminate the need for a human interaction, whether it's contact with paper, whether it's even approving certain transactions such as the payroll run or the benefits enrollment period. The machines can do these things. So providers are going to be introducing new technology and also packaging services in ways that include more and more things. It's kind of like buying a car. If you bought a new car every year, you would see new features and gadgets introduced. The price might not necessarily go up. In other words, many of those features and gadgets may be included in the price. But nevertheless, they're differentiating themselves, the providers are, by offering more and more. So that's going to increase the growth of BPO in general. In Asia, some providers outside of Asia, but also in Asia, and we'll talk about Asia providers in a minute, see Asia as highly desirable for a couple of reasons. And I'll get to a couple of them in a minute, but mostly the growth of the business market, the commerce in general, and the growth of the use of technology, again, having no legacy of the old traditional BPO. And so what we're seeing are many US and Europe-based providers who are selling directly into Asia. They are opening offices. They have delivery centers in Asia now, and there are some, in some cases, Asia-specific services that are offered for different Asia countries. So Asia is being targeted. If you are on this call and you are a buyer, an employer, you will have plenty of choices to choose from with very competitive features. Thirdly, new Asian in-country providers are starting up and expanding. This is very true in India with ABC, with Sutra, in China with Sino HR. There are others, again, Asia-based and Asia-provided services. And so they are not waiting necessarily or not relying on the US or Europe-based providers, such as ADP and NGA and Aon Hewitt and many others that are also in Asia. It's not to say that they're not there. In fact, they pretty much are dominant in most markets, but we are seeing Asia-based providers, what we would call Asia for Asia, India providers for India employers, China providers for China employers growing. And of course, that means that they're going to have an advantage in any competitive situation because the locale of the provider almost always trumps the expertise of a provider. So if someone is looking at a bid from ADP and a bid from Sutra HR, both in for services both in India, then Sutra would probably win that because it's based locally and there would be an expectation that they would know the rules and complexities of that market. So Asia is having a lot of focus right now by providers. Fourthly, from the buyer standpoint, from the employer standpoint, their HR programs are becoming more and more sophisticated. I'm not saying here that they are wildly complex, but they are adding new features all the time, just like other employers in other parts of the world are adding things like life insurance, vision insurance. They're adding more complex medical programs. They're adding savings or retirement pensions and schemes. They're becoming more complex as they compete for employees. Well, what that means is that many employers, those same employers, those buyers, are desiring outsourcing because it's complex and it's easier to offer more of those programs without having to do all the administration yourself. So we see more programs being introduced, which is driving more interest in outsourcing. Next, there is also Asian countries legislation. This is somewhat hand in hand with Asian employers wanting to offer more and more complex HR programs to attract employees and attract candidates. But there's legislation that goes with it, everything from payroll tax to labor laws to government reporting and compliance. All of this will just follow like the sunrise follows the evening, the growth of HR programs across Asia in any one country. Well, that again is feeding a desire for outsourcing. And then one other program that, or part of the program that is very important is technology is allowing companies to start up, to grow and to expand, especially internationally, much more quickly. It's much easier now to, let's just say, open an office in Vietnam when you already have an office or headquarters in Singapore, or to open multiple offices across Asia in Vietnam and Malaysia and Australia out of your headquarters in Singapore. It's very easy to do that from a recruitment standpoint. It's very easy to do that from a payroll standpoint. It's also easy to do that from just a sales standpoint. Well, employers who want to grow and can see that they do this through the internet very quickly don't want to wait on having to hire an HR manager or to hire a legal counsel to give them guidance on payroll taxation in Vietnam. They want to open that office, get their employees live and productive, and let somebody else handle all of that administration. So all of these reasons here are ones, plus one more, that are feeding the Asia market. The HR BPO services, and this is what it all comes down to in Asia, are more affordable and more accessible to employers in Asia, especially small to medium employers, than they've ever been before. Providers in the US and in Western Europe that historically offered services only to very large enterprises, 10,000 employees or more, even as low as 5,000 employees or more. That's a big number, but that's where those services were usually targeted because it was the best place to cut out costs and to introduce efficiency. Well, now that those markets have been penetrated, and when I say markets, I mean the geography or the national markets, once that legislation has been learned and conquered in a sense, those same providers are now very willing to offer those same services to employers with, say, only 2,000 or 1,000 or 500 employees in a country, or much less, such as 50. So if you're operating out of Australia and you need 20 statisticians out of India in a hurry, or you're moving your operation there, an HR provider can also help you recruit those employees, open that office, and administer HR and payroll very quickly. And they're willing to do this, again, for small employers. So if you put all of this together between market demands, the technology, the buyer's demands, compared with what the providers are doing in response, there is a very healthy and fertile market for HR BPO in Asia. Now, let's talk about for a second where your HR BPO journey could start. I've listed here very broad considerations because of the breadth of the audience on this call. At the same time, it's important to make sure you understand the foundation of the market and where it's headed before you just jump into this, or before you even expand and possibly recontract with a new provider. First of all, understand that there are buyers headquartered, the types of buyers are those headquartered in Asia with their employees in Asia or in a country, buyers headquartered in Asia but are growing outside Asia, so they need assistance with those perhaps smaller employee populations in other countries, and then also buyers that are headquartered outside of Asia. So again, North America, South America, and Europe, but have employees in Asia. Those companies may be fine with their services in their home country, but they need quick services in Asia. The providers, again, can be based inside Asia. They can be based outside Asia, but providing services within, or they can be, like I said, Asia for Asia, providing services within their own country. What's also important, very important to note as you start looking at providers, is that the components of their service delivery are almost always disaggregated and are placed in different positions, even within Asia or even outside Asia. You'd have your sales and client management office most certainly in Asia, but the transaction center, the call center, and the data center are many times in different locations, which brings up issues of everything from data security to performance management of the provider to contracting and to pricing. So go into it believing that you are going to have not necessarily a very simple one-stop shop, but instead it's going to be multiple locations, and with good reason. It would usually be bringing down the prices, but still something that you need to be aware of. Here I list, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I list the primary areas where you should be looking for leverage or for uh, gaining some type of benefit in your outsourcing journey. Again, I'm assuming that many people on this call have already outsourced some element of HR. It could be payroll only, it might be recruitment, it might be expat administration. But as you grow, as your company grows, as your employee population grow, you're going to have more opportunity for efficiency, more opportunity for efficiency, but you want someone to bring that to you. On the left-hand side, I list the 5 major areas where you must have leverage. That is, you must demand of the provider that they give you leverage so that you can improve your services and lower your costs. So whether that's labor cost, direct labor costs, or indirect, such as office space and training for employees, the domain expertise. This is why many people are looking to outsource HR. They want expertise that they don't have in-house, they don't want to train their employees on, and they'll never be able to keep up with it. Process expertise, of course, hand in hand with outsourcing to a computerized, technologically based service means that they're going to build, the provider is going to build the most efficient process that they can, and then bring that to you. So they're going to bring process expertise that you may never have access to. Management of the entire operation, the processes, the people, the technology requires, again, resources that you may not have or may not want to invest in. And then, of course, lastly, the technology itself. Many employers are outsourcing HR and even other parts of their business operations, not necessarily for all the other reasons, but because they know they can never keep up with the technological advances. They cannot have the latest software. They can't have the fastest laptops. They cannot have it, and they don't want to make that investment. They would rather offload that future cost, or what we would call the risk of future costs, to an outsourcing provider and let them provide that. So there are 5 areas there I will leave you to think about and to examine when you go forward. Also, moving past the broad considerations, you must consider your company's or organization's strategic considerations. Now here, I don't want to be preaching to the choir. I don't want to be telling you how to do your job, but it is amazing, and I'll talk about this in a minute, why HR BPO projects fail. Why would they fail? How could that happen? Well, first of all, let's talk about what ought to happen, and then we'll talk about what often doesn't happen. First of all, to outsource anything major, I'm talking about a major part of HR, you must understand your business strategy. How is the company going to grow? How and where will it grow? Geographically, organically, through M&A, through partnering. How is that going to, how and where is that growth going to happen? And also, what is your company's technology strategy? For example, are they mandating cloud for everything? Are they, for security purposes, disallowing BPO? Are they disallowing offsite storage of data? Are there mandates versus options from your IT leaders? So you've got to understand that before you simply go to an outsourcing provider, hand off your data, and not be concerned with IT issues. That's critically important. Then, of course, your HR strategy from a people standpoint is going to be important. Where are the people-related demands going to be coming from? Do you want to be the employer of choice? Are you trying to offer benefit programs or HR programs or employment policies that attract employees? And if so, you've got to have the administration to handle that. From your HR operations standpoint, this is where you actually get into BPO. Where are your functional bottlenecks? Where are you weak? Where can you not grow or leverage the department in some area? Maybe it's payroll, maybe it's recruitment, maybe it's expat, maybe it's a lot of things that you're unable to leverage or scale. So you've got to understand that. And then the last strategic consideration I list is that your company's strategy for partnering or working with outside providers. Some companies are going more and more to partnering as much as possible, where they have the virtual company, where you outsource finance, supply chain, many other things. So you need to understand these from a strategic standpoint. I'm going to leave this slide up here for just 1 or 2 seconds to let you see that HR BPO initiatives do fail in many cases for lack of one or more of these options on the left. And so if I have a conversation with you about any of these things, I will be just as likely to ask you as an employer, where are you in each of these areas? Have you clarified and articulated accountability? Do you have a clear and robust financial model? There are reasons why HR BPO projects fail, even major ones with millions of dollars involved. And so be sure and look on that. So now those are the ends of my prepared slides. I've listed on the slide that you're looking at now my LinkedIn address and my email at Yates HR Consultancy. I work with buyers, with providers, and also with investors in BPO companies. And so I can help you in any of those areas. Let me check now to see what sort of questions have come in and take a minute to share that. Let's see here. In the next 5 years, do you see a trend of increase in local HR BPOs taking up business when compared to global ones in Asia? Absolutely, I do. Who better to provide those services, first of all, than someone in country who knows the HR and employment legislation, but also the market environment, the language, the currency, the decision-making process, et cetera. Who better knows that than someone in the field? But on the other hand, ADP and Aon Hewitt and Mercer and NGA and many other companies, Ascender down in Sydney, have opened offices and are growing themselves from outside the country, even from outside Asia. If you consider Australia outside Asia, they're growing and attacking that market. They come in with a model, with technology, and with an understanding of the decision-making process that can work very quickly. So if you are an Asia provider, your strategy for gaining market share would be different than if you're outside. Are all of the principles I've shared applicable for HR shared services model as well? Yes and no. HR shared services would, of course, be a different model where you're providing those services from a single environment within your company. It could be that you have what's often called a center of excellence, where you have a group where all calls from your company go into a center and your own employees answer that. That's a different model, and it works very well for larger or geographically dispersed companies. However, many times, those shared services centers or the centers of excellence are themselves supported by or outsourced to an outsourcing company. So you can do it yourself through a shared service model, or you can do it with an outsourcing provider, or you can have a combination. Is the demand for HR BPO services high in the mid-sized company or mostly large-sized companies in Asia? I'm glad you asked that question. It's very high in small and medium-sized businesses in Asia. I'm talking about employers with less than 2,500 employees and even below 500 employees. Those companies, again, will be starting up quickly. They will want to expand quickly, meaning hiring more employees, and generally in Asia, meaning going to multiple countries. They will not want to wait on having to do it themselves or pay what they might believe are very high prices from a provider that doesn't specialize in small to medium markets. Many of the large company providers are now offering small to medium sized services. They target those companies. They offer many of the same services, but on a smaller basis at a more affordable scale. I compare it to BMW having gone from the 7 Series down to the 5 to the 3 to the 1 Series. They still have the BMW mark, the BMW science and quality, but at a lower price point. That's exactly what the large HR providers are doing. Here's another question. What size of organization should consider bringing HR BPO on board? Well, you could make an argument for any size, small or large. Certainly, if a company has, let's say, more than 3,000 to 4,000 employees in one country, or they have fewer employees, say 2,000 employees, 1,000 employees in multiple countries, say 5 or 10 countries, which is common in Asia. Those would be, I would say, at the minimum size, they should consider outsourcing. I'm not saying it's for everyone, but I am saying that when you consider avoiding the increased cost of the technology, of the staff's training, of in-source and outsource legislation and needing legal counsel on that, you can make a financial case very quickly for outsourcing instead of doing that yourself, even if you're a very small company. You might also start with payroll only or recruitment only, and then test the waters for yourself, build a relationship with the provider, and go from there. Another question asked, when you have a very integrated system which offers complete self-service from pre-recruitment stage until separation, do you really need HR outsourcing? Well, possibly not. If your system, and not just the system itself, and not just the employee interaction, the self-service aspect for employees and for managers is good, but if the support for the technology and the software is good, you may not need to look at any outsourcing. In fact, you probably wouldn't. What happens is, even for those that are in a perfect in-sourcing strategy today, who have everything set, your company is going to change. Your HR policies are going to change. The legislation is going to change. The technology is going to change. And then the question, little by little, but at some point it's going to become very big, is how much do you want to invest of your own dollars in recreating the wheel, in a sense, building all of those resources when you could get it externally and just simply pay a monthly bill? Here's another one, and I think I have time for just one more question, Ruby, before I give it back to you.
Yes.
What are the risks involved in outsourcing HR functions? Well, I would refer you to the page that I said, the 6 reasons why HR BPO projects will fail. One major risk is that the financial reward will not be, or the financial objectives will not be met. Another would be that there will be too much intervention in the implementation of an outsourcing provider to your employees than there should be. And so you create a very negative environment before you get to a positive environment. So there are some risks involved. They can all be mitigated, but they have to be recognized up front. Well, I'm through for the day. I'm going to hand it back over to Ruby. Please contact me on LinkedIn or directly through Gmail if you have any questions or want a copy of the presentation.
Thank you so very much, Morgan. This was a very comprehensive view of how HR can leverage BPO. And there were so many questions coming up. We'll have to move on to the networking zone so that you and the audience can actually pick up the questions again. So Morgan, we'll request you also to go to the networking zone where the audience will be waiting for you for more insights. And we definitely look forward to interacting with you there. Morgan, thank you so much again. It was a very, very insightful session. And I hate to interrupt now, and we would have loved to continue, but yes, we're running out of time. So thank you so much, Morgan. And we look forward to engaging with you in the networking zone. Before we do that, I would like to share the secret code for the session, which is hashtag BPOHRFUNCT. That is BPOHRFUNCT14. That's 14. I'll again repeat that. That's hashtag BPOHRFUNCT14. I'd like to thank you, Morgan, for your time. Hope you have a great day ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for attending this session.